Welcome to Administering Lync server deployments. My name is Anand Lakshminarayanan. I'm a program manager in Lync manageability team. And with me today is Cesar Ungriana-Shu. He's another program manager, and we've worked on OCS 2007, 2007 R2, and now Lync 2010. We've made some big changes in our manageability infrastructure and the way administrators interact with Lync server from the previous releases in this release. So I wanted to walk through some of the changes we did, some of the motivations behind why we did it, and also show you a bunch of demos for the tools that you can use. With that, let's get started. So as session objectives, the first objective is to dive into the new manageability architecture in Lync Server 2010, look at supported topologies, and the reasons or the motivations behind some of the changes as to why we did them, and walk through demos. I want to spend most of the time in demos today. And as key takeaways for the audience, the goal is to have an understanding of the topology options that are available, the key issues addressed by the new architecture, get a flavor of the tools in action, and of course, you play with them yourself, and you get a lot more with that. So we'll give you a flavor of the tools, and you can give you enough pointers to go and find the tools and play with them yourselves. So with that, how many of you here in the audience today are running Lync Server 2010 with production users? How many? Okay, that's about 15, 20% of the audience. How many of you have a Lync Server 2010 in pilot? Okay, that's another 10%. And how many of you are running a previous version of OCS, 2007 or R2? Wow, okay. Is there anybody who is not running OCS or Lync at all and is kind of new to, okay, there's a couple of people there, okay. So most of the audience, I think, is running OCS 2007 or R2 and are in the process of moving to Lync 2010. And so as we go through the session, we'll try to point out the differences in terms of admin experience and the model that we've done, so you get an idea of what to expect in Lync Server 2010 for manageability. So just to kind of get level set where we are, a very simple admin lifecycle, a simplified ATIL model kind of thing. So we have planning, and we have a new updated planning tool and planning guides for Lync Server 2010. Deployment, the tools we have, topology builder, the local setup using MSIs that actually talks to central management as a part of the deployment, and then the new migration tools. All of the stuff in white is brand new with Lync Server 2010. For administration, we have a control panel, Lync Server 2010 control panel and PowerShell. Brand new again with Lync Server 2010. If you're familiar with previous versions, we used Active Directory-based tools like MMC and WMI for management. For monitoring, we have a new 2007 SCOM 2007 R2 management pack. We have an updated monitoring server. Those are updated from previous releases. And then we have synthetic transactions, which are new with Lync Server 2010. So basically, a brand new set of manageability tools, and also significant improvements to previous version tools. So deployment was covered in a session on Tuesday. Monitoring was covered in a session yesterday, and today we're talking about administration. So the first topic is topologies and manageability architecture. And I wanted to kind of summarize the feedback that we got from 2007 OCS and R2 OCS that we took as input as we designed Lync Server 2010 manageability. Well, the first feedback we got from customers was, with 2007 and R2, deploying the product was pretty complex, especially if you're deploying all the workloads. And also, there are many standalone roles, such as web access, mediation servers, web components, and so on. All of that added to the topology complexity. Virtualization was limited to IAM presence only in the previous releases, and that was also adding to the complexity of deployment. HLBs, hardware load balancers, were always difficult to acquire, manage, and configure correctly. So that was another big piece of feedback we got. Multi-site deployments. We have OCS deployed in multiple geo-dispersed data centers, and modeling and managing that was pretty hard, both in terms of deployment and in terms of management post-deployment. And finally, traffic, internal and external traffic. We want clear separation of that. You could do that with OCS 2007 and R2. We formalized the director role in 2010. So with this as input, we kind of went to design the Lync Server 2010 supported topologies. Here we tried to co-locate as many roles as possible, and we will see that in just a second, to address the first 2 bullet points. We no longer have standalone mediation servers or web components. Those are all co-located on the front ends. Our virtualization support has expanded significantly in Lync Server 2010, which we'll talk about in a further slide. We're supporting a new load balancing method for DNS-LB as an addition to HLB. We've started on this path. DNS-LB can be used for SIP. We still need HLB if you're either migrating from previous releases, during migration, as well as for HTTP traffic. But our goal is to give you a full non-HLB option in future releases, and this is the first step towards that. Multi-site deployments, we'll walk through a topology model in Lync Server 2010 as to how we address that. And for the last bullet, traffic for internal and external, we've formalized the director role in the topology, so your admin tools will make sure that you cannot assign users to a director role, for example. And it's a first-class citizen in topology builder and so on. I'm sorry, one other item was certificates being difficult to configure and manage. And one of the big improvements we've done with certificates is to have certificates be used, internal certificates used in all internal servers. We've standardized on that. On the public certificates, we've also gotten rid of public key exchange that we needed and private key exchange that we needed for MRAS or media relay. And we use one set of public certificates for that in most situations. You could have special situations where you need more. Supported topologies in Lync Server 2010. We have a standard edition which supports up to 5,000 concurrent users. It's a single box install without high availability. If you have enterprise edition, that's the option with high availability, where we have front-end role, where we've now co-located all your SIP components, your web components are all co-located on the front end now, as well as mediation server can be co-located on the front end, and even new components as we add them in mobility and so on in the roadmap, we want to co-locate all of them on the front end servers. Backend is our SQL backend databases that continues to stay on. We have a consolidated edge role, which we've already had in R2 as well, where we have the SIP roles, the data proxy, media relay, all of those roles co-located. AV conferencing servers, we recommend that if you have more than 10,000 users, that you deploy a separate audio-video conferencing or media server pool. Exchange Unified Messaging and System Center Operations Manager, we're listing them as dependencies that work together with Lync. And optionally, you can separate out your mediation servers. One of the other features in topology regarding mediation servers is the ability to do control or route to N gateways from one mediation server, 1:N. We've added that new in Lync Server 2010. Archiving and monitoring roles can be optionally deployed. The director role can be optionally deployed depending on your security requirements. We have a SBA or a survivable branch appliance, which is new with Lync Server 2010. And we've also carried forward group chat roles with 2010. So those are a separate optional install as well. So a quick look at kind of an enterprise edition reference topology. We have Active Directory here, a parent and child domain configuration, a certificate authority and DNS servers in the mix, and Exchange is already deployed. I'm adding the Lync roles and their dependencies here. We have a front-end pool and a back-end pool. We have a director pool deployed. In the DMZ, we have the edge deployment and the reverse proxy for HTTP incoming traffic, and a PSTN gateway connecting to the PSTN cloud. And Also optional components, AV conferencing pool for more than 10,000 users, the monitoring server pool to monitor voice, and System Center Operations Manager to monitor the deployment. Then we'll add a couple of branches, branch 1 and branch 2. Branch 1 has our SBA deployed, and branch 2 has PSTN gateway deployed. So this is kind of a quick 2-minute or 1-minute tour of the topology. With a single data center, you can go up to 100,000 users. In this particular example, by adding more front ends, in this particular example, we have about 20,000 users with about 14 servers, including high availability. So that puts us at about 1,400 users a server in this deployment. A lot more information is available in our deployment guide, so I'm just quickly going through this. Virtualization is significantly expanded from OSIS 2007 R2. You can virtualize now all Lync server roles. You can also virtualize our dependencies, SQL, Exchange, Active Directory, as per those product guidelines. We support Hyper-V 2008 R2. 2008, Windows Server 2008 Hyper-V is not supported. And we also support other vendors through SVVP program, most notably VMware. And our standard edition server is also virtualizable. What's not virtualizable is our branch offices, our gateways, and our hybrid gateways, mediation server plus gateways. We also don't support live migration of our VMs via SC VMM, System Center product. Because if you do live migration, we actually drop ongoing calls and sessions. So that's, because it's a real-time product, it's hard to support live migration right now. And we do not support mixed environments where some roles are virtualized and other roles are not virtualized. On the client side, app virtualization supports client modalities except remote call control. And with VDI, we support IM presence and desktop sharing. We do not support right now soft phone, audio, or video support. And the guidance is use IP phones if you're using VDI for audio, video. Other restrictions around virtualization, we need HLB for virtualization. During a pilot, we don't support load balancing, only in production. And when you virtualize, since we are dealing with real-time workloads, audio, video, app sharing, et cetera, you have a significant drop in performance. So roughly around 50% from our perf testing if you go to a virtualized topology as opposed to a physical topology. Some of the other products, you actually get a lot more performance, but since this is since Lync is real time, you see a significant reduction in perf for virtualization. So we've gotten questions through TechEd yesterday, today, and from many other customers about, hey, if I virtualize, I seem to need about the same number of servers, or as if I were to deploy physical. And because it's a real-time product, that is kind of the way it is right now. So this is a big improvement from 2007 R2, where we were not able to get from the operating system cycles to allocate resources for audio, video. We were bound by OS scheduling algorithms, and in Hyper-V R2, we have a hook inside the OS, so we can control the scheduling of our processes better in the guest OS. Okay, the next topic I want to talk about is central management. This is another new area that we've added support for in Lync Server 2010. Because of central management, there is a significant difference in the way that admins interact with our system, and we can walk through that in the next few slides. Again, kind of a little bit of background around why we invested in central management. Before Lync Server 2010, some top customer issues that we had seen were we had configuration spread across AD, SQL, local stores, et cetera, multiple stores. That was hard to manage. We did not have access to the edge server from Active Directory. Manual configuration was needed on the edge. For anyone who's configured federation, pick, allowed domains, and so on, you had to go to every edge and manage that. The Active Directory topology was not aware of the edge server, so that was also a manual configuration. Another common request from customers was, I want to make a bunch of changes. I want to validate that these new changes work together really well, and then I want to apply them. With the AD topology, the minute you made a change, it became live in some sense. So it was not like you can make a bunch of related changes, apply them together in one shot. With our new tools, this is possible. And if you've gone through the deployment session on Tuesday, we showed the topology builder tool where you can make a related set of changes, like bringing new pools alive, bringing the SQL stores associated with the pools, the file store, all of them modeled in topology, and you can publish all of that in one shot, which is the way we've tackled that problem. And the next problem is configuration out of sync in multiple stores, sites, and geographies. This is related to AD replication, which used to be a significant pain point for customers. Planned changes were published into AD, and it took a while to replicate to different geographies as well. And that caused a lot of misconfigurations and out-of-sync situations in OCS. So to solve these specific problems, we introduced central management in Lync Server 2010. The central management is the idea is basically a central definition of both schema, both topology and configuration in one place. So you have a bunch of XSDs that define how you deploy how you define your topology and how you define your configuration. All of these XML documents that conform to the XSDs are stored in the central SQL database. All changes, anytime you want to make a change, all of those changes happen against that central database, which is called the central management store. And we push out read-only copies of all these changes to every node in the deployment, every Lync server in the deployment, including edge. And that actually means we can control edge configuration centrally as well. And finally, it gives us the opportunity to validate changes before commit and eliminate misconfiguration. A classic example is you want to archive a user, but archiving for the deployment is not turned on. In 2007 or R2, you have to run some validation tools to catch that situation. So let's look a little bit more into how the central management store works. We first have an administrator that wants to make a change to topology or configuration or policy. The administrator uses some of the tools that we'll see a little later in this session. The administrator makes a change using one of those supported tools. A particular component inside central management called master replicator generates a snapshot of the new configuration with the changes included and creates a new document, a diff document. File transfer agent, which is another component that we are using, takes this diff version of the document and sends it to every computer, LS14 server in the deployment. There is a local replicator agent that's running on each of the Lync servers, and that picks up these new changes. It gets notified, picks up these new changes, and loads it into a local store database. So there is a local database copy of all these documents. And when it's successfully picked up those changes, it reports back status to CMS, Central Management Store. And finally, that status can be reported in CMS, and CMS tracks this over time. So some advantages of this we already saw. It's a single master. Replication latency is significantly reduced because we are using a separate scheme now to do the replication. Since AD databases are significantly large and there are many other products making AD changes, we had AD replication delays. And now with our own file transfer, we're limiting the size of these documents to be really small, and we can get very quick turnaround. We're already replicating to the edge through this using HTTPS, which is a new feature. And finally, because the status is transferred back, you can check the status with tools from our UI or PowerShell and so on, keep track of it. And also, all of the validation happens before step one. So if you want to make a plan change, and the plan change is somehow inconsistent with the existing topology, you get validations and warnings all before the change even takes effect. So we'll see some of these in demos today as well. The next topic I want to talk about is, we looked at CMS, Central Management Store, and topology of Lync is is one document inside the central management store. And I want to talk about changes in the topology model that we've made, especially if you're familiar with OCS 2007 and R2. I wanted to point out the changes here. We are now modeling a deployment as a collection of sites, and each site is made up of pools. The pool concept is the same or similar to OCS 2007 and R2. The site and the global deployment concepts are new with the Lync 2010. The pools host services or workloads, and pools also host users. So here's a sample deployment. We have a global deployment for Contoso, and it's made up of two sites, site A and B. And there are pools inside each of those sites, and users assigned to each of those pools. So with this model, we are able to model your entire deployment in one topology document, and we're also able to apply policies based on this model, which we'll see in the next slide. We've added policy scopes, new policy scopes, and a policy resolution algorithm for those. So let's talk about those. First, I want to distinguish between configuration and policy. Configuration is some setting that a component needs. It applies to all requests equally. It's kind of knobs that you can tune. An example is archiving configuration or access edge configuration or address book configuration. A policy, on the other hand, is needed when you actually process a particular request in the context of a request. It could be user policy, it could be tenant policy, and so on. So it's in the context of a request. This implies looking up the policy based on some data in the request and resolving it. Examples are voice policy, archiving policy, etc. So now, what are the new policy scopes in Lync Server 2010? We have a global policy, a site policy, a pool policy level, and a user policy level. Kind of goes back exactly to the topology levels that we saw in the previous slide. And we have a new resolution order, which is the closest policy to the user wins. So if you have a user policy that gets picked up, if there is no user policy, then the pool policy gets picked up. And if that doesn't exist, then a site policy, and finally a global policy. With that, with this previous slide and this slide, it gives you a way to manage policies more effectively, so you don't have to assign policies per user and manage them. For example, if you want to turn off call forwarding for all users in a particular site, here's how you do it using PowerShell. You basically have the -allow call forwarding, set it to false, but you set it up for a site which automatically applies to all the users in the site. Another example is you want to enable pick for your entire deployment, and that's you can set that policy at the global level. You can do overrides at user level or at site level and so on. There were a few questions in the interactive session about how effective it is to have site policies and pool policies. People tend to end up using global and pool policies only. And there was also some ask about, can we tie this to AD better? Active Directory distribution group. So we'll see some of that in the demos today. Okay, with that kind of background around topologies and architecture, now let's look at the actual administration tools. So again, in the spirit of the session, just listing all the feedback that we got in the previous releases, from the previous releases. MMC UI was a lot of pop-ups, nested dialog pages, and it's an extremely complicated UI to manage. We didn't have a good automation interface in the previous releases. We used WMI, but we wanted to kind of get a better automation interface in place for Lync Server 2010 based on the feedback. And then multiple levels and places, having configuration at these levels is confusing. Can you give me a way in which you can show me effective policy really easily? And also, can you add more configuration validation into the administration tools? So we took this feedback, and finally, a better delegation model for admin tasks. So I want to be able to delegate pieces of administration to different parts of the organization or different owners. How can we do that? So we took all this feedback into consideration, and we built Lync Server Control Panel, which is a web-based UI. It's a scenario-driven management UI. It's based on Silverlight and PowerShell, and it targets the most relevant PowerShell features. It does not expose every feature in the product. And it has a lot of features that are improvements over the previous MMC version. Easy navigation, easy searches. That's, search bar is available, and you can filter and search on different attributes like AD filters and other filters. Effective policy. So you can go on any user and look at the actual effective policy across global site, pool, and user, which applies to that user. Voice routing support is built in. We've tried to get rid of all these cascading property sheets. And RBAC, or role-based access support, is actually built in. And many more features. And it replaces our MMC. So with that, let's actually look at a demo of the control panel. For the demo, we have Cesar here, an admin of Contoso, an organization. Cesar visited TechEd 2010. He saw enterprise voice features that we have in Lync 2010, and he's very excited about them. So he's gone back to Contoso headquarters, and he wants to basically enable a bunch of users for enterprise voice with Lync Server 2010. So that's what he wants to do right now. With that, Cesar, go ahead.
Thank you, Anand. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lync Server Control Panel. As Anand has pointed out, it's a web-based interface with the advantages of not having to install Lync-specific code on the client that you would use for accessing. On the left side, I see a very well organized of high-level tasks, high-level categories. And as I'm navigating through the high-level categories, a secondary navigation is available for the subcategories. Let's see this experience in action for configuring some simple configuration for voice routing. I will create a dial plan. I have a new site that I want to enable for voice in my environment, and I'm going to create a dial plan. For those of you that are familiar with the OCS 2007 R2, dial plan is the new term for what used to be referred as location profile. Let's walk through that experience. New, site dial plan. There are a couple of sites that are available in my deployment. I'm going to go with this temporary site. We're going to call it Site A. It's what I'm going to play with the pilot environment. There are a couple of properties that I will have to specify. The simple name is used for the integration with Exchange. I'll quickly go through this. And the interesting aspects are when I enter, go into configuring normalization rules. A normalization rules is the set of rules that the system will apply to take the input given by a user when they interface with UC devices or the telephony as on their desktop experience, and take those numbers and generate an E164 number out of it. Let's create a 5-digit extension normalization rule. I want the user in my environment to be able to use 5-digit extensions because that's how they've been using the telephonies until now. So I'm going to create a new normalization rule, 5-digit extension, starting with with the 2 as a digit. It's easy to build the rule, starting digits 2, exactly 5 digits. And to generate the E164 number, I'm going to add 1, 40473. That's how my environment is configured. As I'm going through this configuration, I can also test what would be the impact of this configuration rule against one of these numbers. So I can easily validate while being in the UI in one context. The UI shows me how that normalization rule would be used to expand into a E164 number. There's another information that makes my experience easy. While I'm navigating through configuring this section of the voice configuration, I'm always aware of where I am in terms of context into the overall experience. I'm creating a new dial plan, and I'm doing normalization rules. In the past, when I had to do this operation with OCS 2007 R2, I had to switch between dialogues, and every once in a while I would lose context on where I am and what I'm supposed to do next. With the new UI, the breadcrumbing gives me a very clear context, and I know where I am and I know what I need to do next. I have a couple of normalization rules that I've created for other dial plans. I have another site called Redmond, and I would like the users that are hosted in this site A to be able to use 5-digit extensions to reach out to the users in Redmond. And I want to leverage the work that I've done to configure the Redmond site. And I find it very easy with the Lync server control panel to find some of these normalization rules that have been predefined in the system. I can select, I can copy those, and they get added automatically to my new dial plan. So the work that I've done to create the configuration for a different site, for a different dial plan, I can leverage that configuration and import it in the new dial plan. I'm happy with the results of my configuration. I hit OK. I also have a chance now to review the uncommitted changes before I've done them. At this point in my experience, all the work that I have done to make configuration changes has not been persisted yet. It's stored locally. I can review those changes to make sure that when I press the commit button, all those changes are what I expect they're going to be, and I haven't mistyped or I haven't introduced any undesired behavior. I'm also capable of exporting the configuration. I can export the configuration, including the work in progress. I can export it to a file. I can send that file to my fellow voice IT administrators from other sites to give them a chance to review the changes and make sure everything works fine. Let's commit those changes. Commit all. Commit. Simple. So one of the things that I like with the new Lync server control panel is this capability of staying in a same context, in a pretty easy to understand workflow to configure the voice rules. I have integration with the voice route helper. It allows me to test, it allows me to preview the impact of the changes before they get committed. And more importantly, I can share all the configuration steps, all the work in progress with other people in my environment before making those changes permanent. Now, let's go and see what's go to the user management experience. I have a new hire in the organization, and I would like to be able to enable those users, that user to the system, and give them the voice capabilities that I've just configured. Let's go to that experience. I want to enable users. I'm going to search for that user, and there are different methods that I have access to. I can issue an LDAP search based on LDAP attributes. In our particular case, I'm going to zoom in on a specific user. I can do portions of their display name. It's easy to find. I'm selecting the user. I'm going to use his email address for the SIP domain. I'm going to enable the user for enterprise voice. And I'm going to rely on all the default policies. Some of them will be generated from the global. Some of them will be evaluated from site-level policies. I'm happy with oh, I also need to sign on to a poll. Enable the user. Very simple. Now, I can change properties on this user after the initial enablement. And this is where I'm getting a lot of additional information compared to what I used to have in OCS 2007 R2. I get one view on a particular user that gives me the resulting set of all the capabilities that that user has. For example, for the dial plan policy, I see it gets evaluated automatic based on the dial plans that have been assigned in my hierarchy. I can get access to that, and I can see that the effective policy that would be applied to this particular user would be the policy that was assigned at the site level. Not only that, I can have the details associated with that policy. And that's really important because as I'm managing the user in the UI, I have one place to go, and all the relevant information is accessible in one easy-to-follow workflow. I can change, for example, their dial plan policy, say test help. I can change their conferencing policy. And while I'm attempting to do these operations, I have easy access to the details of the policies that I'm about to assign to those users. So it's fairly easy to understand, all within one context, very different and a lot more intuitive than what I had to do with the previous experience of CS 2007 R2. I'm going to commit those changes, and Cameron is enabled for enterprise voice at this point.
Thanks, Cesar. So that was a quick look at voice configuration using Lync Server Control Panel, or UI. The next topic we want to talk about is our automation interfaces with Lync Server 2010 PowerShell. This is a new interface in 2010. It basically allows you to easily manage Lync Server users, entitlements, policies, all aspects of Lync Server. It gives you a way to script your bulk changes and automate regular system management and maintenance. It's also a familiar admin experience with the rest of the Microsoft stack across Active Directory, Exchange, SQL, et cetera, all of which support PowerShell administration. And for the admin, the value is to leverage the scripting knowledge that they've developed across the rest of the Microsoft stack. And also to tie cross-product processes together. So, new user joins your company, how do you want to entitle them for Exchange, Lync, Active Directory, et cetera. So we can see some demos of that. And finally, new role-based access control implemented through PowerShell, which enables you to delegate administration tasks to different users within your company, different administrators. And we also have a fixed, out-of-the-box set of RBAC roles that we are shipping with Lync Server 2010. So with that quick introduction to PowerShell, the next demo is essentially, now that Cesar has enabled enterprise voice in his Contoso deployment, there are a lot of users who want to get on Lync in his company, and he wants to basically start using automation to solve some of his problems. And he also has some cross-product challenges as well in managing these users. So Cesar, can you show us how you do this through the automation interfaces?
Sure. Before we start doing the demos, how many of you are familiar with PowerShell from the Exchange world? How many of you like PowerShell? Okay. How many of you are scared of PowerShell? As always. We'll try to make it fun, and the people that are scared of PowerShell, hopefully they're going to live with a better experience. So.
And hopefully the people who like PowerShell, continue to like it after this.
Yes. So let's try with a simple warm-up exercise. Here's a simple command that you would get to run in my Lync PowerShell experience that will allow me to find a set of users that are homed on a particular pool. One important aspect that I like about the implementation as an IT admin is the consistency of the Lync PowerShell implementation. All the commandlets have the CS prefix in the noun. That makes it easy to discover, easy to understand the flow across some of these commandlets. So in this particular example, it's a simple command that will return all the users that are homed on a particular pool, and I'm going to filter on a subset of attributes on them. That's the warm-up. Now, let's get it a little bit more interesting. I have been investing in my environment to learn PowerShell for Exchange, and I have automated procedures involved in mailbox creation and mailbox management for Exchange. I want to be able to leverage those skills and apply those for managing Lync entitlements. So what I'm able to do from one PowerShell session, I can bring functionality from both Exchange, and here we're using Exchange's remoting capabilities. I can bring functionality from Lync. Lync is enabling, has capabilities for remote PowerShell as well. And we're here in an instance where I have both mailbox commandlets imported from Exchange, and obviously the Lync commandlets. Let's go through the experience that I put together, demonstrating the steps I would take to enable a user for mailbox and enabling a user for Lync. We have a new hire in our enterprise. Her name is Suni, and this is what I have to execute to do this cross-product enablement. I call enable mailbox, which is an Exchange commandlet, and I can take the output of that execution and pipe it into the Lync commandlet. So mailbox piped into enable CS user from Lync. It's one liner that gives you mailbox creation and entitlements for Lync. It's fairly easy. Now let's see the results. Do we have a mailbox for Suni? Yeah. Do we have a CS user? Do we have a user enabled for Lync for the Suni account? Fair enough. So I'm able to leverage the skills that I acquired when learning the PowerShell implementations for other UC products like Exchange, and I can easily translate those skills into Lync management for users. It's very important for environments that have developed PowerShell-based automation. Now, I also want to be able to do bulk operations in terms of user entitlements or user management. In this example, I have a CSV file that was generated from an HR system that contains a list of all the new hires that have been provisioned into the system. It's a very simple CSV. It has a name, alias, and line URI, which is a telephone number. And I want to be able to parse this file, and for each user that is being represented in the text file, enable them for mailbox and give them the Lync entitlements. Let's see that activity in action. I'm going to be using the built-in capabilities of PowerShell of processing, parsing files. And then a very simple command that will take each user represented in the file and is going to create a mailbox for them. And then similarly simple command line that will take all the users that were read from that file, and they're going to be enabled for Lync. And then at the end, we're going to set the telephone number for those users. And let's see the results. We see all those users showing up as entities that are Lync enabled with telephone numbers. So it's fairly easy to put together PowerShell built-in capabilities, again, exchanges the capabilities of processing commands in batch mode, and then we adding Lync capabilities to your processes. I also know that some of my environment is representing in AD information that has to be used for automating business processes and entitlements. For example, I want to give all the users that are in the department, in the sales department, the capabilities of dialing international calls. That is represented in my environment through a policy that is called international calls. And I want to be able to search in Active Directory for all the users that have the department attributes set to sales, and operate on them in batch mode. Here's a simple example on that. Get the list of all the users that are matching that attribute. And it's a very simple command. I can use the LDAP filter, and I specify a typical LDAP criteria. It's a very simple one here. Now, let's take that output and operate on them in terms of Lync entitlements. The command becomes get CS user with an LDAP filter, and for every user that comes back, I'm going to assign them a specific voice policy. With grant CS voice policy, the command led responsible for that. Let's see that in action. Let's see the results of that sequence, and we can see that all the users that were in department sales now have a voice policy assigned to them based on what my business rules have specified there. So very easy to look in Active Directory, use LDAP filters, and identify a set of users to operate in bulk mode. Some other departments have a group membership as a way to specify what entitlements users should have. In the next example, I will show how you can integrate with capabilities of at the Active Directory PowerShell to assign a particular entitlements for all the users that are in a group. We're going to use PowerShell command to integrate with ADSI, and we will locate the sales group, which has all the members of the sales department. A simple built-in PowerShell capability. Let's see their current state. Their voice policy is empty, which means they don't have a particular per-user policy assigned to them. Their entitlement is going to be evaluated at runtime, walking the hierarchy, side, or global. And I want to assign these users the international calls policy again, and this is how easy it becomes. For all the members in the group, sales group, I want to grant CS voice policy with international calls. Let's see the results of that action, and we can see that these users got the voice policy. So it's easy to use the Lync implementation of PowerShell and integrate in the processes that I've built for mailbox management. Easy to integrate with the overall PowerShell capabilities to automate the processes around user management and do those bulk operations.
Thank you, Cesar. Let me find my spot back in the slide deck. We saw a demonstration of managing users with Lync Server 2010 using PowerShell. I wanted to say here that every management feature in Lync 2010, much like Exchange, is fully exposed through PowerShell. anything you can do with the Lync product as an admin, you can find PowerShell commandlets for it. The control panel UI is fully built on top of PowerShell. And we've heard your request about showing the commandlet that is being executed, which we don't show in Lync Server 2010 from previous discussions here yesterday. And we will definitely take that feedback for a future release of Lync. Now, we wanted to show you a demonstration of an end-to-end scenario validation using some validation tools in Lync PowerShell. Cesar, the admin at Contoso, he's been widely successful with enabling Lync users for enterprise voice and saving the company a lot of money. That the CEO wants to be Lync enabled, and so he contacts Cesar and says, "Enable me for Lync enterprise voice." With most high-profile Lync customers and CEOs, they eventually run into a very corner problem very quickly. The CEO is not able to make voice calls in a couple of days, and then he calls Cesar, and this is a high-profile investigation. I can't make calls right now, Cesar, so can you fix it? And the first thing Cesar does is actually look up the monitoring server reports that you saw as a demonstration in the session around monitoring and troubleshooting yesterday. He pulled up the monitoring server reports, and he saw the specific call that was not completed. And the monitoring server report told him it is something to do with SIP timeouts that he was getting and making the call. So we'll assume that he's done that part, and now he wants to troubleshoot what is going on and how to fix the problem. Right?
Luckily, I have the Lync PowerShell implementation that gives me access to a set of very, very powerful commandlets that enable an administrator to execute end-to-end a transaction that touch all the pieces involved in that execution. I'm finding those commandlets by getting a list find all the commandlets that have the test as a verb. That's how the commandlets are being grouped. They're easy to discover. And obviously the CS prefix for the verb. Let's see how do I use one of those commandlets to validate what's going on with the voice calls. So I'm going to be using the testcs pstn outbound call commandlet. I want to specify a target number to be called and the pool that will be involved in the transaction. It so happens that this is my cell phone number. We'll try to switch in the presentation. So let's see what's the output of this execution. It's going to take a couple of seconds for that to complete. And while that is happening, let me walk you through some of the other commandlets that are available for testing validation. I can use the test commandlets to do simple IM. I can test the peer-to-peer audio video, and when I execute these commandlets, the system will be exercised end-to-end. It's not exercised in isolation, and that's really very close to what an end user would see. And I'm finding these commandlets to be very, very useful as I'm building the deployment to make sure that all the pieces are working together in an expected way. I can identify network configuration issues. I can identify certificates configuration issues. Now, my commandlet came back. So the output tells me that there is a timeout in the interaction between the front end and the gateway. That typically, from what I've learned from the forums and the other people that have experience with Lync now, it means that the gateway has a problem. So I wanted to find out which of the routes are affected by this gateway that might be down. I find out I have two simple routes. They all go through that problem gateway. I have another gateway in my environment. I'm going to quickly switch the voice routes to go through the backup gateway. It's fairly simple. And now I want to retry making the call and see if the problem was fixed. To variate a little bit, maybe someone in the audience wants to provide their cell phone so we can make a call.
What's your number, sir?
404. 432.
Hold on. I'm going to type it out. 404.
432. 52.
98. Thank you.
No, don't everybody call me.
Spam you.
So
Let's try.
So we fixed the routes to go through a better gateway. I would expect something to happen differently.
Oh, it's on. Believe me, I've been responding to email all morning.
We can do it.
It's typical of what happens when you try to fix the CEO's problem. It doesn't work. Any luck? Is this a better gateway?
It's still trying. Might be a little bit of. Okay. Let me do it one more time.
Failed again.
I'm getting the same.
So you got a timeout again. Did you actually switch the gateway?
Yeah, the gateway has been switched. I have this other gateway which is in the mix, and you should receive a call. So I think what happened was a little bit of delay between making changes and those changes percolated through the system.
Can you see if you got a missed call, sir? All right.
Nope. I only have one, and that was from 1025.
Okay. I think we should inform the CEO of the failure and order a new gateway and move on. But it does say success though.
It says success, and it should call. Maybe we can try it again.
Okay. Let's keep going.
Okay. So
All right.
that's what we have for links and data transactions.
Okay.
Should make it work.
Apologize for the demo failure here. Next topic is delegation of administration. This is a drill down into how RBAC, role-based access control, actually works in our system. We basically have the administrator using PowerShell connecting to our management web service, which performs the authorization. Administrator is authenticated using PowerShell 2.0 fan-in remoting. By that we mean different administrators all connect to the same management web service and get authenticated there. A new PowerShell session gets created that only contains the subset of commandlets that the user, this administrator, is allowed to use. And then in that PowerShell command shell, the administrator executes a task, and we perform authorization checks and only allow changes to objects and commandlets that are within the scope of that administration, so the administrator. And so this is a kind of a quick view of how RBAC is being designed. Basically, CS Management Web Service is actually the one that executes the call after all the authorization has been completed. So that's a quick overview of RBAC. And in terms of thinking about an RBAC role, we need to think of who can do what actions where. And the what action is a set of commandlets that an administrator in a specific RBAC role can execute. The who can point to an Active Directory group for membership, which is the set of admins in that security group or distribution in the security group, actually. And the where is basically a configuration scope. And the configuration scope is basically a scope that can be either configuration scope or user scope. So you can manage configuration settings or user settings. So that is what it takes to define an admin role. Let's look at a demo for how to create a new RBAC role, as well as how we can exercise the features in the RBAC role. So Cesar has a new hire in his organization that he wants to delegate some of the admin tasks to. and he wants to use RBAC for this purpose. Let's see how he does that.
First of all, I will get a list of all the admin roles that are available out of the box in the system. Get CS admin role. A couple of them, CS administrator, voice administrator, user administrator, and a couple of more specialized ones. So what I'm going to do, I will create a new RBAC role, Lync RBAC role, based on the user administrator template. Let's quickly go to this. So in order to do that, I will call new CS admin role. I provide the name of the role, which essentially is the same name as the AD group that I've created. There is a one-to-one mapping between the groups in AD and the name of the role. I'm going to tell the system to use a CS user administrator as a template. I want to give that new employee rights to manage only user entitlements. They're still very early with the deployment. I don't want them to be able to make changes to areas that they're not responsible, or maybe they're not understanding very well yet. I want them to scope down to user administration, and I want to scope what they can do in terms of users that are affected to a particular OU. I can specify the organizational unit where that user has rights, where that IT admin has rights to do user administration. It's created. I get a lot of feedback. Let's see that in the list. The new role shows up in the list of RBAC roles. I'm ready to ask the person to log into the system and see the impact of it. Let's go back to the Lync server control panel UI. This is what a regular admin would get as part of their experience. Let's see what the new user that is a member of a reduced RBAC scope would get as a result of logging in. I will log on as Lync user admin. The UI is refreshing, and we'll see that the number of categories that they can navigate has reduced because some of the tasks that were available there are not available in the user administration role. He can have access to a lot of features related to user management. For other areas in the UI, he will get a read-only view for some of the policies or the configuration that he can use for troubleshooting users, but it's only view read-only. There's easy access to finding all the roles that the current logged-on user has. I'm finding with Lync server control panel that the Lync user admin is part of the role that I've just created. So I can use RBAC to scope down what users can do, and the UI reflects the capabilities that that user has.
Thank you. That was a demo of role-based access control and how you can implement that with PowerShell and the impact it has on the UI. So we've seen a bunch of features and administration tools today, and so this slide is about kind of putting it all together. We saw a new central management configuration store that we've added and a central management server. We saw PowerShell with delegation that has been implemented in Lync Server 2010, and a new UI in control panel using web-based Silverlight UI. So here is a scenario that puts it all together. In Contoso, we are federating with a new company that we want to add federation to, and Cesar is going to walk us through making that change as a configuration, seeing how it gets reflected in central management, and following the path of the change all the way to the Lync server where the information needs to get sent. So, Cesar, go ahead.
Switch. So for that, I will use, again, Lync Server Control Panel. I will use the external user access category of tasks. I will go to federated domains, and I'm going to define the new allow domain for our federation. I will federate with fabricam.com. Fabricam. And I will commit those changes. I can check the topology view of Lync Server Control Panel, what happens with the replication status. The changes that I've made have been persisted to the central management server, and they're being replicated through the system. I can also check that replication status by looking into PowerShell. I have a commandlet, get CS management store replication status. And that gives me more details about what are the systems that we're replicating to, what is the status of the replication. By the time I went to PowerShell, the replication has completed. So all the changes, the changes that I've made are available in the local repository of configuration on each of the machines. I will go to the edge now and check what does the edge know about that particular configuration. I will call get CS allowed domain, and I will use the local store as a parameter. The local store will retrieve the information as it's being discovered on the local copy of the configuration on that machine. Voila. The information that we have entered in Lync Server Control Panel made it to the system, and on the edge is available. So any federation with the Fabricam enterprise can start at this point because our edge has that configuration.
Thanks. So that kind of winds up our session. Our objectives today were to look at the manageability architecture, the supported topologies, and the key reasons why we chose this new architecture. We've walked through a bunch of administration using control panel and PowerShell, and saw a bunch of scenarios including user management, scenario validation, RBAC, and finally allowing federation with the partner. And the key takeaways of the session are you understand the manageability architecture, understand the topology options available. We've seen the tools in action, and we have pointers in the deck in the next section to more information and related sessions in TechEd as well. So here's a list of related content and some links. And please submit your evaluations for the session. It's very important to us, and we take that feedback for the next TechEd. With that, I'll open up for any questions you may have. And with questions, please walk up to the mic, and we have a few giveaways for questions today.
People have questions. For questions.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir. Oh. Hey.
Okay. I have a customer which is using recording functionality, and he complains about the quality. Is there anything we can do for getting a better quality of recordings?
So recording on the client side, I assume you're talking about Lync client recordings, right?
Yes.
So Lync client recordings are actually done at the client side on the machine where you are joining from. So it is not a server-side activity. So I think it's based on the audio quality that the client gets, and that is what is recorded using using the actual media stream that the client receives. So it is not a server-side feature for the quality of recording. The knobs on the server side are to control whether recording is allowed or not. That's the only thing.
But what kind of codec is used, and what kind of bandwidth?
So let's take that offline. I think we have a media person that can help you with that specific question. So let's take that offline. You wanted to know if the demos are going to be available along with the slides. So one thing we can do is copy some of the PowerShell stuff as an additional resource slide, and we'll make sure that gets updated so you can download that. Okay, all right, thank you. Yes, sir.
For the CMS, is there only one per organization, or can you have one per site?
There is only one per organization right now. It is not one per site. We've been given feedback about having read-only CMS in other sites so that replication doesn't have to all happen from one place. For the first release in Lync Server 2010, this is the first time we introduced CMS, and so we haven't taken on that complexity this time. But we certainly understand the need to have read-only CMS replication from other sites.
Yeah, it's just that our organization has several business units, and each business unit is often self-directed.
Okay, great, okay. Well, thanks for the feedback.
And is there any other single instance?
Say that again?
Is there any other sort of single instance components per?
Right now, CMS is the main single instance component in the topology. Yeah, it's the only one right now. And here's a little gift for you. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I was just interested in the delegation stuff where you were doing role-based delegation. And, I mean, I presume there's the ability to limit the user to. You said there was a limit the command subset in PowerShell that was available. Does that subset also include effectively read of more components? Is it granular in the read and write aspects as well? So set and get granularity?
The scoping on the commandlets includes has both read, get, or set. Now, in terms of the scopes refer to only writes. So when you set up a new role and you specify a user OU or a site as a scope, what that gives you the capability of running the change commandlets into that particular scope. You would be able to get read access outside that scope.
Okay.
So the scoping that is specified in the delegation of administration is very specific to making changes.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
There are some roles that have test commandlets in them, so tests are included in that.
I have only one giveaway, so I'm going to reserve it to for the detailing question. Go ahead, sir.
So in OCS 2007 R2, we had Open Federation at the edge. Is that still a capability in Lync, or is it perfect?
Yes, we have Open Federation as well as federation by specific domains. So we support both of those, actually. Yes,
okay, great. Thank you.
In our environment, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, sir. I actually didn't see you.
That's fine. In our environment, management wants to kind of consolidate the email addressing, the UPNs to the SIP addressing.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any issue in adding a custom SIP address that isn't really tied to the domain naming?
Your SIP domains are kind of independent of your SMTP domains or your org domains. That said, you basically need to manage certificates for your domain, so that's the issue. But
so as long as you own and register the SIP addressing domain that you want to use, you can implement it without issue?
yes, that's correct. That's correct. Yes, sir.
Hey, good morning. Is this on? When configuring the Lync client, you know, there's tons and tons of settings. You referenced early in band provisioning. It appears that you can do most of the settings within band provisioning, but it also appears that some of the settings you need to do through GPO. Can you explain the difference and why that is?
In Lync 2010, we tried to move a bunch of the previous GPO settings to be controlled through in-band. So we were trying to go down on our usage of GPO. Mm-hmm. That said, there are still a few settings that we have to have through GPO. But by and large, our direction has been to migrate as much as possible out of GPO and into in-band. So pretty much, I'd say 90% of the settings are now in-band. We still keep old support for them through GPO, but we're migrating more and more towards in-band, actually.
Is the plan to eventually move them all? If you didn't
we
want to use
we
GPO?
actually, except for about 2 or 3 settings, we actually are already moved most of them to in-band. The few that are remaining, that are only, I'm talking about the few that are GPO only.
Yeah.
Those I don't know if we could move to in-band, because just by the very nature, I think they have to stay GPO. But effectively, we are trying to encourage in-band as the preferred option.
Okay.
And I have a giveaway for you, sir.